She marched up to my porch like she owned the whole lake. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses too big for her face, and that same smug attitude everyone in the neighborhood knew her for. "You need to sell," she said flatly, like it wasn't even a request. According to her, the HOA had big plans that involved turning the quiet woods behind my cabin into a row of high-end lake villas. And apparently, my land was in the way. I laughed, thinking she was bluffing. But the next morning, there were 2 police cruisers parked outside my gate. Karen had called the cops, claiming I was violating some undeveloped land agreement, which, by the way, didn't even exist. She waved some printed HOA document at the officers, demanding I be removed from the property unless I agreed to sell. One officer looked unsure, the other just confused. I stayed calm, stepped outside, and that's when everything changed. The moment her eyes landed on my shoulders specifically, the tattooshi went silent, like full-body freeze. Her voice, which had just been yelling about easements and development rights, disappeared into the wind. The officers looked at her, then at me, and clearly picked up on the shift. Thing is, that tattoo isn't just ink, it's a symbol. A very specific one that connects to something Karen never expected. And in that moment, the power flipped completely. She thought she had control. But she had no idea who she was messing with. Karen didn't say a word. She just stared at the tattoo like it was some kind of warning sign, and in a way, it was. That ink wasn't just decorative. It marked my years in a special unit, something not many people know about. I don't advertise it, but those who recognize it usually know to back off. The officers didn't know what it meant, but they definitely noticed her sudden change in tone. She stepped back, mumbled something about needing to call the board, and disappeared down the trail faster than I'd ever seen her move. That gave me just enough time to explain to the officers what was really going on. I showed them the land deed, which clearly states the property has been in my family for over 100 years, long before the HOA ever existed. No violations, no agreements, and certainly no legal way they could force me to sell. The cops seemed relieved, honestly, like they realized they were being dragged into something petty. But the part Karen didn't count on. I already knew about the so-called development plans. A neighbor had tipped me off weeks ago, said Karen was trying to buy up land quietly so she could partner with a builder and cash out big. She didn't just want my land. She needed it. And now that I'd said no, she was starting to panic. The tattoo just sped things up. What she didn't know yet was that I'd already started digging into her paperwork, and it wasn't looking good. A few days after that strange standoff, I started getting letters, official-looking ones. They were supposedly from the HOA board, claiming I was hindering community growth and threatening daily fines if I didn't reconsider selling. Thing is, I'd spoken to 2 board members at the last meeting, and neither of them had heard anything about this project. That's when it really hit me. Karen was going rogue. Using the HOA name to pressure me, maybe even forging documents to get what she wanted. Meanwhile, my neighbor Tom, who owned a small patch of lakefront 2 lots over, came by looking rattled. He said Karen had approached him with the same exact deal, only she offered him cash under the table if he kept quiet. She said it'd be easier if you were out of the picture first, he whispered. That changed everything. This wasn't just about real estate, it was about control. I went back through old HOA newsletters and filings and found something odd. Over the past year, Karen had shifted the meeting times, changed the voting rules, and slowly removed anyone who questioned her plans. The board wasn't even functioning like it used to. No financial records were public anymore. She'd created a pocket of power with no oversight. And now, she was using that to force people off land their families had owned for generations. The real twist. A boundary line adjustment from decades ago had been buried in county records, and it showed something Karen definitely didn't want anyone to find. I drove down to the county recorder's office the next morning, documents in hand, heart pounding. The old map I found wasn't just interesting, it was a problem for Karen. It clearly showed that nearly half of the land she'd been pitching as future lake villas wasn't legally under HOA jurisdiction. In fact, part of it overlapped with protected shoreline, and the rest fell into what was labeled as family-owned private lots, including mine and Tom's. If that ever got out, her entire development plan would collapse. But from the looks of things, she'd been banking on no one digging that deep. Back in the neighborhood, things were getting worse. Karen had doubled down. Contractors were seen surveying land without permits, and she was spreading rumors that I'd been hostile to the board and was standing in the way of progress. A few folks were starting to believe her. One neighbor even asked me why I hated the community so much. That stung. All I ever wanted was to preserve the land my grandfather left me. Then, out of nowhere, I got a certified letter not from the HOA, but from a developer's legal team. It accused me of obstructing a pending commercial agreement and warned of legal action if I continued interfering. That's when I knew this was bigger than Karen. Someone with money was involved, and they were using her to push the deal through. But what they didn't know was that I had just uncovered one document that would flip everything upside down. I opened the envelope from the developer's legal team again, reading every word. Something didn't sit right. The letter referred to Phase 2 of the villa project land acquisition, pending permits, and a timeline already in motion. But here's the thing. No such project had been approved by the county. I called in a favor from someone I knew at the zoning office, and what she told me stopped me cold. There had been a preliminary proposal submitted months ago, but it wasn't filed under Karen's name. It was under a shell company tied to a real estate firm, and Karen's name was listed as a silent partner. That meant she wasn't just helping the development, she was going to profit from it. A lot. This was no longer just HOA power games. It was full-on corruption hidden under fake community concern. Meanwhile, word around the neighborhood was changing fast. Karen was pushing hard to hold an emergency vote to force the sale of my land and others nearby, claiming we were blocking economic progress. Flyers appeared on doors overnight. She was framing us as stubborn, selfish holdouts standing in the way of luxury and lakefront revenue. That same night, someone left a note in my mailbox with no signature. Just 6 words, written in shaky pen. She's not working alone. Be careful. I kept staring at those words, heart racing. Because if Karen wasn't the one calling all the shots, then who was? And how far were they willing to go to get what they wanted? The town hall meeting that night was packed. Word had spread fast, too fast. People weren't just curious, they were divided. Some neighbors were angry, confused, others unsure who to believe. Karen stood at the front with a slide deck, smiling. Like she already won. She talked about progress, modernizing the lake, and increasing property values. But right before she called for the vote, I stood up. I walked to the front and calmly placed a folder on the podium. Inside were copies of the boundary records, the deed history, emails between Karen and the developer's shell company, and zoning letters that clearly showed the project had no legal standing. And then I showed the ownership filing proof that midnights on the Ruby Kiss. Only Ruby Kiss has the luxurious texture that glides ons. My rewas, my lies, on squeeze. And lies, 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 lies. And lies are so lies. Against my wise, my sill lie. We subticibe, my wise, my silly. It's a quisize. We are cerise-eyed. We so wide we acquired else. I wise it. We sat on I kai, it all sign we sick I, we not killy I suck we get a gun sa, it's sick you ka I da sa guy, it's to be to say sick with the caddies and I we just it's scared of the it's let get it bear with this. Karen was a silent partner in the development. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She froze again, just like she had on my porch that day when she saw the tattoo. Only this time, she had nowhere to run. The county zoning official who had come, quietly at my request, confirmed every word. The vote was canceled on the spot. Karen's face was pale as the board members stepped away from her one by one. But the twist, as I left the meeting, my phone buzzed. A blocked number, I answered. A voice on the other end said, "You may have stopped Karen, but you just cost my firm millions. This isn't over." I looked out at the lake, silent in the dark. It was never about just the land. It was about who would dare stand in the way. I stood there holding the phone, heart steady, not saying a word. The caller hung up after a few seconds of silence. Whoever it was, they wanted to scare me. But it only confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't just about lakefront property anymore. It was about power, money, and the quiet way people try to steal both when they think no one's watching. In the days that followed, Karen resigned from the HOA entirely. The board voted to freeze any land-related decisions until a full audit could be done. A few of the neighbors who had doubted me came by to apologize, bringing cookies, firewood, and stories of their own run-ins with her. The community started feeling like one again. Not a collection of properties under one woman's thumb. The zoning office opened a formal investigation into the development firm, and county records were updated to protect the shoreline from being zoned commercial without a public hearing. That one old boundary map saved more than just my land. It protected the lake for generations. I still keep an eye on things. That voice on the phone hasn't called again, but I'm not naive. When money's involved, people don't always give up quietly. But I also know that standing your ground, even when it feels lonely, matters.